And so that's the purpose of this talk today. The motivation for this talk actually came from me just talking to a colleague at another conference. I had my oldest son, who's now 14, when I was a third year in medical school, and I delivered during interview season for residency. And I had a lot of PTSD from that, started with an 8-month-old, and so I happened to be talking to another colleague, and I got on my soapbox, and I said, oh, I would never recommend this to anybody, this is terrible. And she really surprised me. She stopped me and she said, you know what, I had my first in medical school. It was the best time ever. And it got me thinking, maybe there's a lot of different perspectives. I then ran into other colleagues who had expressed some regret for not having started earlier in their career because they had run into some infertility issues. And so the point of this talk is to start a conversation, and that's what this is, a conversation. And one of my colleagues pointed out, she goes, let me be specific or explicit. N-of-1 means there's really no right answer. So if you don't feel like sitting here for another 15 minutes, the answer to when is the best time to start a family is it depends. And so it's your N-of-1. And so today, we have no disclosures. That's me and my family. And we have a fantastic set of panelists here today who are so kind and wonderful to share their very intimate and personal experiences so that you can benefit. They're going to give us one pro and one con for their decision. We have 2 minutes per person. They have fantastic stories that could probably each go an hour. But I didn't bring my big cane, but I'm going to kind of have a big cane and sort of cut them off briefly so that everybody will have a chance to talk. And what I would ask from you, from the audience, is just if you could please hold your questions until everybody has had a chance to talk. And they're all more than happy to talk to you after the session. Okay? So I'm going to introduce our first panelist. That's Dr. Neha Raukar.
I'm introducing myself. Oh, I got it. Hi, I'm Neha Raukar. I'm an associate professor at Mayo. I am the most traditional, I think, of the panelists in that I had my first child when I was a new faculty member. I waited about a year, so I had my vested vacation time so I could take the time off to take care of my new child. I'm married to a surgeon, and so that presented its own set of challenges. And I did not have any infertility issues. I followed a very boring path. And so my con, I wrote out. I had a bunch of cons when I was actually going through the process because you'll note that daycare times do not match up with when my shifts occurred, right? And so that was a huge con. It made me really resentful of my lifestyle. But another con is that typically women have a slower start to their careers as they balance academic productivity and family responsibilities. And so you'll note that women tend to fall off the academic track because they can't manage both. And there's a lot of stressors when trying to become a productive academic person and managing a baby at home. And so that's my con. Those are my cons for having a baby as a new faculty member. And I think my pro is that it allowed for no distractions during my formative training years. I'm not sure if that's a good pro. It's the pro I had. And so I would say my bias, and I told you this, my bias is to have a child when you are more protected, so in residency or as a medical student, because as an attending or as a consultant, you're not very protected, and you're not as protected, in my opinion. That's my story.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Michelle Lall.
Hi, I'm Michelle Lall. I'm an associate professor at Emory. So there's my family. I'm also married to a physician, and I think we trained apart. So we were sort of pre the couples match era. And I think had we been training at the same time, I would have started my family earlier. But I fortunately didn't struggle with any issues with infertility or anything else. And it was literally the day after I took my written board exam. We said it's time. And my first was born at the very beginning of November, so pretty much 11 months after I took my written board exam. So I do think you are in some ways less protected as a faculty, but you also have the financial resources to make your life work. So I was fortunate; I could afford a live-out nanny for many, many hours a week to take care of my children. That said, I'm also the person who switched jobs when I was about 20 weeks pregnant with my third. And I just kind of showed up and said, here I am with 3, and we're going to make it work, right? And technically I wasn't eligible for FMLA or anything else because I had not been with my employer for 12 months. But I was fortunate to go to a really amazing group that was able to work through that with me. But it's just some things to be aware of, that depending on where you are and the culture of the practice you're in, your leave may be entirely unpaid, which, especially if you are the primary breadwinner in your household, can be really something that you struggle with. But it's really important to take that time. So I think for me, the biggest con was sort of getting over that there is no perfect time. And it doesn't matter if you're junior faculty, if you're a medical student or resident, there's always some downside. And you just have to go for it when you feel like it's the right thing, the right decision with your partner, and you'll find a way to make it work. We're emergency physicians. We find ways to make things work every day that other people can't. So you just use the skill set you have and you figure it out.
Thank you, Michelle. Kat Ogle, isn't it?
Hey guys, I'm Kat Ogle. I'm an assistant professor at George Washington in Washington, D.C. This is my son, Cole. He's now 7. And I think I am the person on the panel who didn't actually make the decision, really, to start the family. It came as a very unexpected surprise. And it came as a surprise because I was separated from my now ex-husband, living in a studio apartment in my 3rd year of residency. And I got a phone call from our program director that I was going to be one of the chief residents. And I was rather emotional, and then I realized, why am I feeling like this? Because my ex-husband and I had started dating again to see if we could make our marriage work. And naturally, I wasn't on birth control because we'd been separated for 8 months at that time. And so I went to CVS, I got a pregnancy test, I went to the Starbucks bathroom, and I peed on a stick, and it turned pink. And I was floored. I called my co-chiefs, I called my best friend, and I really didn't know. I knew my marriage was not going to work. The backstory behind that is quite circuitous, but I knew my marriage wasn't going to work, so I was like, am I really going to do this? Am I going to be a single parent and a chief resident in a studio apartment in Washington, D.C., when all of my family's in New Mexico and Arizona? I have no support. I have no money. I went and I talked to my OB, and I was like, I don't think I can do this. And she's like, of course you can. And I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And so ultimately, I did. And it has been a rocky road. There have been some significant challenges with co-parenting. And, as far as like the cons or the biggest challenges, I think because it was the end of residency and sort of moving into my ultrasound fellowship, you have to, when you become a parent, you actually have to protect the time that you need to study and do those non-clinical shift things. Like, you don't do very well taking care of a baby post-night shift when you have to do some administrative tasks later in the day. So you have to not only schedule childcare, which ends up being your village. Like, you have friends come over, you figure out who your support system is. But you have to schedule time to study. I had to schedule time to study for boards. You have to schedule time to sleep, because even though, the early years where your child is not sleeping too much, you are sleep deprived, but you can only be sleep deprived for so long, and then you start making poor decisions for your life and for work. So, but I think the other pro with this, and this really sort of echoes on what these guys have said, you can do it. And there is no perfect time, and you're gonna make it work. If you want to be a parent, if that's the choice that you're making, you're gonna make it work, and you'll find your village, and everything will be fine.
Next is Melissa Parsons.
Hi there, I'm from the University of Florida College of Medicine, Jacksonville, and I am not a parent yet. Technically, I'm mom to 4 frozen embryos currently, but I'm the person on the panel talking about physician infertility. So when I started this journey 2 years ago, I thought this would be easy. I would do IVF and I would have a baby. That was not accurate. And so my first round, I actually ended up with an ectopic. And as I was on shift, knowing I had an ectopic and researching everything, I came across an article that really changed everything for me. And it looked at physician infertility, and specifically female physician infertility, and found that nationally, women have a 12.1% infertility risk, but female physicians actually are 24.1, so we're double the national average, meaning as opposed to the normal like 1 in 8, 1 in 4 of female physicians will struggle to get pregnant. And with that, there's also, we have higher rates of pregnancy complications, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm now on my 4th round of IVF, waiting to do a transfer, and I have 4 frozen embryos somewhere safe, hopefully. But that really has become the thing that I'm passionate about talking about, is physician infertility. And so as all of this panel shares kind of their story, I think we have to consider that, you know, we get taught about the risks of advanced maternal age in medical school, but nobody really tells us the risks that we may face. So know that as you wait longer, you may already be at increased risk for infertility, and so that additional age may make a difference.
Thank you. And last but not least is Brian.
Hi, good morning. I'm Brian Lahmann. That's my amazing husband and my 2 kids, Helen and Sarah. My oldest is 17, my youngest is 12. So being gay and how to create a family is a little bit different for us. And when were we going to do this? I had my midlife crisis probably at 27 and decided I wanted to switch from business to go to medical school. So we started, I started a post-bac program, and then we wanted to have a family. So it took us an IVF center, a donor egg, a surrogate, a lot of attorneys, a lot of legal agreements. This was pre-marriage equality, guys. This was years ago. Like I said, my oldest is 17. But we made it work. My oldest was born the February before I started medical school. So I started medical school with an infant. And my oldest was started when I was an intern. So she was born September of my intern year. I went out for a well visit 35-week ultrasound in Illinois. I live in Pennsylvania. Ended up, she was put on bed rest, induced. I called my program director and said, hey, I have a baby. I can't leave Illinois because of some legal issues. Can I take my vacation right now? And they were wonderful, absolutely wonderful. So that's sort of my story. Is there a right time? The time is right for you when you decide it's right for you. My goal was I wanted kids when I was young. If you do the math right now, I now have a junior. I'm turning 50. Oh, I'm more than 50, 52. So the time right for me was to move it along fast. I wanted to be young with my kids, and that's what we decided to do. So that was the pro and my impetus to move this along. Couldn't be happier. The con, guys, is when you're young, med school, residency, having kids, expensive. You don't have a lot of time. But guys, you guys are all smart. You're emergency medicine physicians. You're doing this. You know how to figure it out, like someone else said. You're smart, you know how to solve it. So if you want kids now, quick, and not wait to be a faculty person, go for it. It'll work. You have protected time. So that's my story.
Thank you. So we do have some time for questions. So now I wanted to open it up and see if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask.
Thank you guys so much for sharing. I was recently talking to one of our pediatric emergency medicine fellows who trained in pediatrics, and I was surprised that she had gotten 10 weeks paid leave for her maternity leave. I know AWAEM has a policy that you can only have 6 weeks off per year. I just didn't know, or 3 weeks off per year.
So putting on my associate program director hat, you have to train for 46 weeks per year to be eligible to sit for the AWAEM boards. So if you do the math, you can have 6 weeks off in a year and not get behind in training. So in many programs, that becomes your 3 weeks of vacation that you would have that year, and then these other 3 weeks that are typically paid leave for physicians, or resident physicians in most programs. So you can certainly take a longer leave, and I've been in an APD role for 10 years, and I've had a lot of residents take an extended leave because it's hard to go back to work with a 6-week-old. Babies are really small still then. But then they are behind, you know, and it's not a big deal. There's a form that gets filled out for AWAEM that describes the interruption in training, and typically they're still able to sit for the board exam in November. But, you know, they are super seniors, so they stay over in July. Yeah, which is really great when you have a super senior in July in your department. It's awesome. But the other thing to consider is programs do have a fair bit of flexibility. So in many, pediatrics is probably the best example, and I think it's because it's a female-dominated junior field where they have rotations that are remote or are very creatively designed so that the resident is technically working in that block, but they may be able to do the vast majority of that work from home. So legally, they're probably not off, but they've been very creative in opportunities for them. And I know there are programs who do like EKG selectives that can be done, a lot of it remotely, you know, or from computer, and most of that dialogue can be done remotely without you having to come in.
So just to piggyback on that, my experience being a chief resident, so having Cole in December of my chief year, I had my vacation time, and I crammed all of my vacation time and my elective time together, and so that ended up being my maternity leave. So with the elective time that I had and the vacation time that I had accrued, I had a total of 9 weeks off. But it was, you know, off. I was doing research while he was at home.
Talk to about this, I encourage them all to take extra time, as much time as they feel that they need, because you never get that time back as a parent, but two, I mean, you are emotionally, physically, mentally exhausted. Typically, you're not very productive, but I think that has to come from leadership down to say it's okay. And then when you talk to some of the people that we've had kind of stay on as super seniors, they're like, it was the best month of my entire residency. It was so fun to get to see all the new interns and really function in like a junior attending capacity and see everybody in that light. So I think that it's really important to counsel people that it's okay to take the time.
I remember years ago, one of our residents said, I'll finish this paper during that time. And so my chair called the resident up like 2 or 3 weeks and said, hey, how's that going? Because I want to, and she was really taken back by somebody bothering her during that time.
Right.
So she went from saying, oh yeah, I can do this, I'm not going to be doing anything, to saying, hey, I don't want to do anything. And I
Right.
think that should, as probably academicians and faculty, we should probably be trying to encourage that, I think.
I agree. I mean, I think we need to empower trainees to say, I'm going to be gone for 8 weeks, 9 weeks, whatever it is, and I'll see you when I get back. But I think there is still that need for kind of implicit permission that to do that is okay, and that it's not a negative in your career.
I'm curious how yours worked. Did you get time off?
I did not.
I'm sure
It
not.
was back, there was not paternity leave, so there wasn't marriage equality, so I literally took, I was in the department in September when my did both, and they were two different experiences. I mean, for me in med school, I was the type of student that I didn't go to a lot of lectures. I mean, I will be honest with you. It was either lectures or study because I had a newborn and my husband worked full time, and so I stayed at home. He came home. Here's the baby. I go study. You know what I'm saying? So I think it was easier in med school than residency because in residency you're controlled by your work schedule, but you make it work.
I think you just have to be really structured with your time. If that's the decision that's right for you, you'll have to figure out a way to protect your time for studying because you're also trying to learn how to be a doctor. And you know, for me, I always knew that I wanted to be a doctor and I wanted to be a mom. And so when this opportunity to be a mom came, albeit unexpected, I was like, okay, this is how it's going to go. We're going to do this.
I would just comment real quick that you just, whenever you decide, and you guys feel free to comment, you need some kind of support, however it comes. And it's expensive, so you need financial support, and you need some sort of support in your life, wherever that comes from. Would you guys agree?
Yeah.
For those of you who waited to pursue this after your training, how did you approach that conversation with potential employers, knowing that you were probably going to encounter that within your first year out?
So you don't. They cannot ask you anything about this. It is illegal. Okay. If you start the conversation, okay, I'm going to put on a different hat. Every single employer should present to you on your interview day what the maternity and paternity package look like. You shouldn't have to ask for it. It shouldn't be a secret. Okay, there is implicit bias and there will be an assumption when you interview for every single job that you are going to go out on leave, and probably not just once. So just accept that. That's there. Even in the most progressive departments and groups, the bias is there. I don't think that it's a conversation that I would open up with at an interview. I do think it is your right to ask where the policy can be viewed. And as I said, part of having transparency around paternal leave policies, maternity and paternity, is that they are very clearly visible for anybody who's looking at the group. It is important to kind of, when you're interviewing and meeting people, kind of take a look around, see if you can get a vibe for how many people have families and younger children, because you can certainly end up on an island if you're not careful.
I'd like to tag on to that. My wife's in HR, and that's a topic that she doesn't even approach during we just transitioned to residency. So when she was interviewing for jobs, she didn't ask that question, even though she knows the business, she knows the laws, she knows what you're supposed to be able to ask and not ask. She didn't go into that at all. There is an implicit bias. You just have to be careful.
Just to follow up on that, also, some people that you work for don't have a policy. And you may not find out until you start working for them, and then it's sort of up to you to really build your raft and figure out who has had kids and how did they do it, and because in my shop you have a certain number of clinical hours that you have to work in the year, and that's it. So in order for you to take time off, you basically work a ton of shifts up to the time you deliver, and then you get hammered when you come back from maternity leave. Now there's some institutions that have some pretty innovative approaches to this, and they've actually created staffing scenarios in their department to protect parents coming back to work, so that they don't have to work night shifts, and certainly they're not on single coverage if you're breastfeeding. That's a whole other discussion. But some people don't have a policy.
So I started a job. I was a new attending. And about 6 or 7 months in, I got pregnant, and we had a new chair as well. And I was completely clueless. I was not familiar with any of the rules. I was completely clueless. I just figured I'd have the baby, I'd take a bunch of months off, it'd be easy and fun, and that'll be it. And I'd get paid somehow, and I was completely clueless. And so finally my husband was like, maybe you should meet with somebody. So I met with our admin person. I'm like, oh, how does this work? And so she gave me this rundown, and I'm like, okay, I took notes, and I'm like, okay, that seems good to me. And I left, and I called my husband, and I had a little bit of an audience. And I was the first person in my department under this new chair to get pregnant. So there were some women around me when I was talking to my husband. I'm like, oh, this is what she said. And my friends were like, no, that can't be. And I'm like, that's what she said. I took notes. And my husband was like, that seems really wrong. And so I called my chair because I loved him. And I said, oh, I just met with this woman, and this is what she said. And he's like, I'll be right there. So he came across campus to the ER where I was working, and he's like, I want you to know I support women. That policy is wrong. She was fired. She had been there for 12 years. She was fired within a month, and we had this amazing policy. So there may be like a unwritten or a weird policy, but it's really up to the chair. And so talk to your chair.
Yeah, I was going to add, so as I ended up a patient in the emergency department with round one, I finally had to start talking to people about what was happening in my life. So my chair has known about this for now years, and talking to the other women in our group, I've been able to figure out exactly how much leave time I need to have, and then I've used leave in advance. So I've taken a week or 2 weeks off with every round of surgeries and procedures that I've had, and my department's been amazing with it. I've been able to adjust my nights a little bit so that I wasn't doing a bunch of overnights going into having a fertility procedure, because that doesn't make a lot of sense for circadian rhythms. But I think it very much is how open you are to talking to the people around you. The other women in your group are going to be probably one of the best sources to get information of like, how does this work and how did you do it and how do I navigate behind the scenes. And then having a chair that's supportive and somebody you can talk to and say, hey, this is what I'm going through, has been like the most important thing, I think, for me.
So we are about 10 minutes over, but nobody came to kick us out. So yes. So I wanted to thank all of our panelists very much for their very good stories. We are all willing to continue to talk. Feel free to come up and chat with us. We're happy to take questions until we get kicked out, but officially I know people have places to go, so technically we're done. And thank you very much.